Hey guys, welcome back to Tournament Takes. Hope you guys had an amazing week. It is Thursday, December 3rd. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon here on the West Coast. NFL practices are just being wrapped up. I guess we're going to have news coming out as the week progresses. A lot of injury news, a lot of COVID news this week. Games being postponed. I think, the Steelers in Pittsburgh got postponed a few times. So plenty of stuff going around on the NFL. We just got news, actually, California's starting to shut down again. So the 49ers and the 49ers are actually the only ones there now, but yeah, the 49ers are no longer playing in the Bay Area. They're in Arizona now, so things are kind of being shaken up a little. We're getting down the stretch to where it's gonna really start mattering who's looking for playoffs, who's looking for seeding. So I think it's some stuff to pay. It's a lot more stuff to pay attention to this week. So this video is actually gonna be a little longer. The slate is 11 games because that Washington Pittsburgh game got postponed. So it is a longer video. I'll actually include in the description down below certain games that I'm targeting. So if you guys want to just get to a certain game, you guys can just jump to that point in the video and kind of just look at that breakdown. But read the description. Sometimes I may forget, my train of thought while I'm on the camera. So I always like to write a little tidbit in the description of some stuff that I may have missed out. And obviously I will have another update as we get closer to Sunday. So let's get started. This is a pretty big slate. We have some big names at the top. We do got Russell Wilson on this slate. We have Kyler Murray and Watson, Herbert, Rodgers. Right off the bat, Rodgers looks way too cheap to me, and I think people who are looking at these games, that's going to jump out to them too right away. They are playing Philly. It's a pretty good matchup for the Rodgers. So I think one of the guys to target just right off the bat. But let's go game by game. Let's get into the first game, Cleveland at Tennessee. This game is one of the higher totals on the slate. It's 53.5 over under. Cleveland is the underdog by 6 points. This is a game that I think I want to target a little bit on this slate. We know, I don't have weather news just yet. I think so 4 mile an hour winds, pretty clear. So no real. I'm scrolling down the weather report. Aside from the Redskins, Washington football team in Pittsburgh, weather so far this weekend looks pretty good to me. Like all the way through all the games. Aside from the Las Vegas Raiders and the Jets, that game has 14-mile-an-hour winds. But aside from that game, most of the games are looking pretty good. So going back to Cleveland, Tennessee. We saw Derrick Henry last week explode. I mean, he went for 3 touchdowns, 200 some odd yards. It felt like every time, I was turning on my phone or checking the app, they were at the 1 yard line. Again, Derrick Henry's getting ready to score. Insane performance from him. The coach came out this week and said that they need to get Derrick Henry the ball a little bit more in the passing game. And I think that's kind of been the knock on Henry this entire season, is that he's not catching passes. But I don't know if you guys remember, but last season down the stretch, Tennessee was in the running. Tennessee was the team that was just coming live. You knew what they were gonna do, and they would just come out and do it at a better, in a better fashion that people would anticipate. You knew the ball was going to Henry every single game, and he would just come out and just dominate the game. They came, I think, like a game short of the conference finals, but it's a really, really good spot for Henry this week. He's going against Cleveland. Cleveland they have not been great. So right now, Tennessee's offensive line, they are second in the league. They're only getting they're sixth in adjusted sack rate, at only getting sacked 4.9% of the time. Sixth in the stuff rate, they're getting stuffed 15% of the time, which is a little bit higher. But you got to remember, this ranking's out of 32. And they are running the ball. They're second in the league in adjusted line yards, getting 4.94 yards per carry. So this is a really, really good rushing team, right? That's their identity. They rush the football. You don't see Tannehill throwing it very much in these games, right? I mean, he has those, certain performances here and there, but for the most part, he's capped around 30 passes a game. You had one against Minnesota, 37, but he's capped around 30 passes a game. I did like him earlier in the week, but just the fact that they don't throw as much, kind of makes me want to get off of him here. I think Derrick Henry might be the chalk this week. You got to remember, anytime a player is 9,200, you really need them to have a perfect game. You really want that upside to kind of capture as many points as you can get. And, if they don't smash or go for that 35-point game, you're kind of dead in the water, because 9,200 is a significant amount of your salary, right? So when I'm looking at studs like this that are, paying up 9,000, 10,000 last year for McCaffrey, the only time I'm doing it is when I feel confident they can shatter that price tag. And this is a kind of game scenario where I think that Derrick Henry can absolutely shatter this price tag. Now, Cleveland also tends to run the ball a lot as well. Nick Chubb is also getting a significant amount of carries. You do have, Odell Beckham out for the year. We did see, Landry go for a big game last week. So I like this game script overall. I mean, they got the ball to Landry a little bit more last week, so I do like this game script. Landry got a significant price bump this week for about $1,000. So that's something to keep an eye on. A.J. Brown has a hip issue. He's a little questionable. He missed practice today, which also makes me like Henry a little bit more. And the main reason also why I like Henry is defensively right now, Cleveland is 20th against the rush. They're 29th in stuff rate. 25th in stuff rate, and they're giving up about 4.53 yards per carry to the running backs. So it's a really good matchup for him. The thing with A.J. Brown being a little questionable kind of helps. In my opinion, it helps. I mean, you could also argue that it kind of takes away from Henry as well, because if they don't have that deep threat, it really doesn't open up the running game. The running game and the passing game kind of go hand in hand, right? Once you have both of them clicking, it really, really makes both of them more efficient. So that's something I'm going to kind of keep my eye on. But my target in this game is Derrick Henry. Against the pass, Cleveland right now, they are 24th against the deep pass, 23rd against the short pass. And like I said, the coach said that they did want to get them the ball a little bit more in the passing game. So in this game, earlier in the week, I was leaning on I kind of wanted A.J. Brown, but 7,600 is a lot to pay for him. Anytime, again, like I said, when you're paying these high price tags, you want someone who's going to get the volume, right? And with Henry, we're seeing that he's getting those 20-plus touches every single week. So while people might shy away from this, and because there's so many studs on this slate, I think his ownership might, even though it might be chalky at 20%, I still think I want to get over that number. So he's kind of the first player I'm plugging into my lineups this week, and this is just because it's the first game. It's not necessarily the best player I like, but I really like Derrick Henry this week. On the other side, I do like Jarvis Landry. It's a good matchup for the receivers on the Browns. Tennessee right now is giving up the deep ball, 25th in the league against the deep ball out of 32. They're giving up a lot deep left, deep middle, deep right, and around the short middle. So my thing is, if they're going to be playing from behind, they're going to need to pass the ball. And Jarvis Landry right now, with Odell Beckham out, he's getting plenty of work. One thing I think you guys should do is definitely get a PFF website. It kind of gives you, a good map of where these receivers are catching their balls. But it gives you a good idea of where the receivers are getting targeted, right, and where they're catching the passes. So it gives you a good breakdown of where you kind of want to target, what the defense is allowing, and kind of where you think that you want to expose that, right? So with Landry's getting downfield targets, but he's also getting plenty of short passes down the middle. So I kind of like running it back with Landry in this scenario. He's also the number one receiver right here. He's not really competing against many people for those touches. Aside from Nick Chubb and potentially Kareem Hunt, he is their number one receiver, right? And on the Cleveland side, there's not really anyone that's competing with him. Yes, Rashard Higgins is getting some, but he's not getting anywhere near the volume that Jarvis Landry is getting, right? Now, if I also look at the red zone work, right now Jarvis Landry in week 12 had 11 targets. He had 40% of the target share, right? So he's also getting 23% of the end zone target share. and he had 51% of the air yards. He ran 21 routes, which is the same amount of routes that Rashard Higgins ran, and he was on the field only for 64% of the snaps. But Rashard Higgins was on the field for 67%, but that's, I think, more of a factor of them running the ball significantly more. I mean, they run the ball, they pass at the lowest rate in the league. They're 30th in passing, and they're first in rushing. But again, I feel like this is a game where if they get behind, they're going to need to throw the ball. And I because this is a high scoring game, I feel like it could be closer. I kind of want Landry there for those targets, 8 to 10 targets, and he's being used in the red zone. So I kind of like that as a run back from this particular game. The rest of the spots in this game I'm not really on. I kind of went through the Tennessee side. I think you could play Tannehill, but he's not passing enough for me to want to play him. And the same thing with AJ Brown. I do like AJ Brown because the deep matchups are there for him, but he's just not getting enough of the targets to where he can shatter that 30 to 40 point upside. Kind of like Tyreek Hill did this weekend. He is like that Tyreek Hill type player. You look at his average catches, average passes are about 25. 25 yards downfield. So I think that he is, he does have upside, but he doesn't have that upside at this price tag to kind of shatter a slate where, I could be eating my words because I was on him earlier, but I feel like I'm off A.J. Brown in the passing game. And I think even if Henry is higher owned, I kind of want to get there. Next game, Indy at Houston. This is a game where we found out, earlier this week that Will Fuller tested positive for PEDs and he's out for the season. We also found out that the cornerback, Roby, I forgot what the cornerback's name for Houston is, but he also tested positive. He is out. Houston is decimated right now. They're out. Randall Cobb, he's not there. They're out Will Fuller, and their defense is taking hits. They're also out David Johnson, and TJ Procise is questionable. So this is a game where I feel like, Indy could get ahead. The over-under on this game is 51, and it's actually a closer total, 3.5 point total. But Houston is actually really bad against the run. It's like one of the best matchups for a running back. The problem on the Indy side is that, which one are you going to pick? It's either Taylor, Hines, or Wilkins. I really like Taylor this week, and I also really like Hines. Hines because he seems to be getting there in the passing game. And, Houston's not only bad against the run, but they're also bad against pass-catching running backs. So I think, if you're playing multiple lineups, if you're not playing 1 entry, 3 entry, I feel like Hines and Taylor are going to be a little lower owned in those single entry and the 3 entry maxes. So they're kind of a little more contrary in my opinion. And the main reason I feel like that is because you got to make a decision with one of your RB spots who it's going to be, whether it's going to be Hines or Taylor. Now you could have, people playing 3 entry maxes who might play, 1 Taylor, 1 Hines. I don't think Wilkins is actually getting enough of a share to kind of, take away. I mean, he is getting some targets. So it's just with this Indy team itself, there's just so many players that they have. They got 2 tight ends. They got 3 tight ends now healthy. They got 3 running backs, and they got 4 wide receivers. So it's just a kind of a mess to figure out where the targets are going. So while I feel like this is a good game for the Indy running backs, like if I was targeting someone from this game, it'd be Taylor, Hines, and Taylor and Hines. I also feel like it could go either way, right? We saw last week against Houston, I think on Thanksgiving, right? It was Kerryon Johnson had a, was it against Houston? Yeah, Kerryon Johnson had a receiving touchdown. Was it Kerryon? Who played Houston last week? Detroit. So yeah, so you saw Adrian Peterson get 2 1-yard touchdowns, right? And then you also saw Kerryon Johnson get a bunch of receiving yards. So it's kind of that space where I feel like the same thing could kind of happen this week. You could have Taylor, run a couple touchdowns in. You could have them throw to the tight end. It wasn't a great game for Stafford, but we also saw that the tight ends, Hawkinson in that game did very well. So it's really a great matchup all the way through for Indy. Now, it's a 3.5 point spread. I think this is the spot where Indy just steamrolls Houston. I feel like anytime you have a player missing from your starting lineup, it really changes the dynamic, right? Brandon Cooks, we've seen he's really cheap. He's been getting targets for the most part, but now with that downfield threat and Will Fuller gone, they're gonna really need Kiki QT to be that downfield kind of threat guy, or they'll put Brandon Cooks on the outside, kind of like they did with the Rams last year. They put him on the outside, and you'll just see Kiki Cutie work the inside. Now, Indy is a really tough matchup too. Like, they're really good against the run. They're 10th against the run, only allowing 4 yards per carry, and they're really good against the pass as well. Right? We did see Derrick Henry obviously torched them last weekend. They're giving up some deep balls down the middle, down the left of the field, but overall, like they're 6th against the pass and 10th against the run. This is a tough matchup for Watson. Now, a lot of people are gonna feel like, okay, well, Watson's gonna have to rush the ball a little bit more. Some people may avoid it. I think for me, game is just like a stay away, right? This is not a spot where I kind of want to figure out who it's going to be from Detroit, and I mean who it's going to be from Indy, and who it's going to be from Houston. From Houston, you kind of have more of a narrow target pool. Now they're going to run, like earlier in the year when Fuller was out, they had a lot more 2 tight end sets, but they were sucking at the beginning of the year. Like they lost 20-34, 16-33. They lost against. I mean, granted, those were tougher matchups. Also, Minnesota was the easier matchup. This is the tough matchup for them, right? And I don't feel like I really want any parts. If I was to take a shot, Indy is giving up some production deep down the middle of the field, so you could see someone like an Akins or a Fells kind of get there. It also could be a Brandon Cooks. Again, it's kind of the same scenario with I feel like with on Indy, right? It's kind of like you don't know which person it's going to be, getting those targets. So for me, this game's a cross-off. You guys can take shots on these players if you want. I'm not really on the defenses here either. Indy is really good, but I think, Deshaun Watson is pretty elusive, so I expect they get some points. And, Deshaun Watson is getting sacked at a pretty high rate. Like Texas right now, their offensive line... Houston... They're getting sacked at 30th, right? So they're 30th in the league in sack rate, and right now Indy is sacking the quarterback middle of the pack. So it's not a smash spot essentially for Indy defense, but if you are playing maybe maybe a Jonathan Taylor or a Hines, maybe you want to stack them with the defense at $3,000. They're fairly cheap. It could pay off, but either way, this is not a spot I'm targeting either of them. Okay. Let's get to Las Vegas and the Jets. Now, this is a game I did like earlier in the week as well. I kind of was on Derek Carr. We know that Josh Jacobs potentially may be out. He missed practice again today, and he didn't really play much last week. My thing is that he may not go, especially since it's an ankle sprain. I don't think they're going to push Jacobs. They do have Devontae Booker there, which I think, he might get some of the targets. We also know Nelson Aguilar, someone who I was also targeting heavilier this week. Nelson Aguilar, for me, if I'm targeting this game, is the number 1 target for me. Main reason is the Jets are 32nd out of 32nd against the deep pass in the league, right? And though Derek Carr is not throwing the ball as much because they're rushing, if we see that, Josh Jacobs out and Nelson Aguilar is in, this is a spot where I might want to take a shot on Nelson Aguilar. Last week, Derek Carr was chalk, and he just got annihilated by the Falcons. Literally, like, it was... Every time I turned around, it was Atlanta was getting a pick or a fumble recovery from Carr, and Henry was scoring a touchdown. It was just nuts. They got annihilated 43-6. He came out in the post conference and said, this is a tough week. Practice was a tough week for us, and, they expect to bounce back this week. I'm still a little hesitant. He is throwing the ball 34 times a game, but it's similar to like the Tannehill thing. He's just not throwing it enough to where I feel like he has that smash upside. We did see that upside against Kansas City and against Buffalo. Against the Jets, I don't think this is a spot where they're going to need to put up 100 points, right? It's the Jets. So I'm kind of off of the players from this game, with the exception of potentially Nelson Aguilar on the Las Vegas side, right? And that's purely because he's getting the targets, and he's got a touchdown in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's got significant touchdowns, right? And as of lately, he's also been getting the targets, right? Darren Waller was someone I was playing last week, kind of really frustrating because he got targets late. That 7 targets actually inflated. He got 2 on the last drive of the game, right? So it was super frustrating. You had Hunter Renfrow who was taking away a bunch of targets down the middle of the field, like those short little slant routes. And one thing I noticed is that Michael Thomas against the Falcons last week. So sorry, if you look at Michael Thomas, right, he had the same kind of game against Atlanta, right? 9 for 12, 104 yards. This was 2 weeks ago against Atlanta. They got that same matchup again. And again, what we saw the same position, that inside slot receiver, Hunter Renfrow, he had a bunch of the targets. So this is something I kind of overlooked last week. It was Thanksgiving and stuff like that, so I didn't have a video up last week. I wasn't on top of my A game. But this is the spot where like I felt like, okay, he was a pretty good play given his salary, and Darren Waller, with the amount of ownership that he was getting at $6,000 last week, was a pretty good fade. But I ended up taking the wrong side of that. So with that being said, Jason Witten's also working his way into the red zone. We saw he's coming in at the 1 yard line, getting a 1 touchdown into the end zone. So this kind of is also a little spread out. Again, I will keep an eye on Nelson Aguilar to kind of see if he does go this week, if he does practice like Friday and Saturday, before I'm making my decision. And this is also, like I said, one of the windier games on the schedule. This has 14-mile-an-hour winds. It's just not something that I really feel like I need to get to, especially with other better spots on the slate. This is a 47-point total. The Jets are 9-point underdogs. I think this game could be closer. On the Jets side, I really like Frank Gore this week. I actually really liked him last week as well. I ended up playing Kenyon Drake over him, but I really liked the matchup for him last week as well. My one fear last week was that they get behind and he doesn't get the volume. But with LaMichael Perine out, we've seen that they're willing to go to Gore. They're getting him. He had 18 touches last week against Miami, 15 the week before, and he's getting work in the passing game. 20 touches for someone that's 4,400 is really cheap. He's a good value play. The one concern for me is that the Las Vegas is actually, people think that Las Vegas is horrible against the run. They're actually stuffing the running back at a pretty decent rate. Even though they're 23rd against the run, they are stuffing the running back at a 15%. They're at a middle of the pack, right? They were 10th until this last week, until like a week ago, until they faced Atlanta, right? But it's a spot where I feel like 4,400 Frank Gore could pay off. So he was someone that I was on earlier in the week. He's one of the targets from this game for me. So from this game, I kind of like Frank Gore, and on the other side, I do like Nelson Aguilar. You could also make a case for Denzel Mims. Las Vegas is giving up the deep ball right now. Against the deep ball, Las Vegas is 23rd. They're giving up deep left, deep middle, deep right. So you could take a shot on someone like a Denzel Mims. We saw Brashad Perriman. He seems to be getting there every single week. Like he's 30 points against New England. New England's pretty bad against a deep pass. 13 points against the Chargers. His price has come up, or actually come down a little bit. So he's not bad. He is questionable again. So if he doesn't go, I think Denzel Mims. He's their rookie. So if Brashad Perriman's out, I really like Denzel Mims this week. Sam Darnold is not the greatest quarterback, obviously, but this is a spot where I feel like he could do well. The Jets' offensive line is not horrible. Let me look at the. The Jets are actually pretty bad. They're actually 28th against the pass rush. So while they are 20th against the pass rush, they're not. Las Vegas is not really sacking the quarterback. They're 31st against the pass against opposing quarterbacks, right? Like they're not really sacking the quarterback a whole lot. So this is a spot where I feel like Sam Darnold could have a little time and take some shots deeper down the field. Now, if I look at the Jets, Sam Darnold is. So he's throwing the ball at a pretty high pace downfield. So this is a really good play. I feel like Denzel Mims is a really decent play. Jamison Crowder, I played a few weeks ago. When he got 2.6 against the Chargers, it's so frustrating playing people from the Jets. But this could be another spot where you could look to go back to him. But since they're not really giving up too much of the short passes, I feel like from this side, like the way you could kind of see success for the Jets is you see Frank Gore rushing the ball a little bit, and Denzel, and then taking some shots to Denzel Mims down the field. So if I was to target this game, which I actually might consider as we move on, as the week progresses, would be to take Denzel Mims and potentially Frank Gore, and then run it back with Aguilar. If Aguilar is out this game, then I feel like it makes Frank Gore a little bit better play, because I feel like Jets could actually get their first win here. So that's kind of that game. Let's go to New Orleans and Atlanta. We saw last week Taysom Hill really, ever since Taysom Hill got there, it's really been hurting Alvin Kamara, right? And like I said in my last video or 2 videos ago when they were playing Atlanta, Taysom Hill is going to be the guy in the red zone. He is going to be the one that's going to be getting those red zone rushes. He's going to be, taking away from the running backs, right? So I feel like if you want to take another shot on Taysom Hill again here, you can. Right, we know that Alvin Kamara is questionable in this game. He had 11 rushes, limited practice on Thursday. We'll kind of monitor and see where that is. But Alvin Kamara is pretty cheap at 7,000. This is a sneaky spot. While Atlanta is 3rd against the rush, they're 30th against the pass catching running back. So I feel like this could be a good spot for Kamara, but we have to kind of see again. It's just uncertain. We're not sure where those targets are going to go. It's kind of like another game I'll get to later on down the slate. It's kind of like the Chargers and with Keenan Allen and Eckler. Michael Thomas and Kamara both take away those short passes from each other, so you don't really know who it's going to be. On the other side of the game, we know that Calvin Ridley's questionable, Julio Jones is out, Zacchaeus is on IR. This Hayden Hurst is questionable. This Atlanta team is a freaking mess right now. So this could be a spot where the Saints defense could come through again, like they did a couple weeks ago, against Atlanta. I think they put up 16 points. The Saints defense has been really good. It's someone that you maybe want to pair with like an Alvin Kamara, but overall for me, like this is not really a game I'm targeting, just given the amount of uncertainty. Michael Thomas questionable. As the weekend goes on, I'll kind of readdress this game, kind of come back to it and see if there's anything that I want. We saw Todd Gurley questionable. We saw Brian Hill was a chalk last week against Las Vegas. And like I said earlier, like I was saying with Frank Gore, Las Vegas is pretty, while people think they're bad, they are pretty decent against the run, So I do like Frank Gore, but they are stuffing the running back at a pretty good pace. So like I said in the last game, I was on Frank Gore earlier this week, but, now that I think about it again, looking at what Brian Hill did last week, it's just maybe not a spot where I want to go. Overall, New Orleans and Atlanta, the over-under in this game, 45. It's a low over-under. It's probably the lowest over-under on the slate. Yeah, it's the lowest over-under on the slate, aside from the Bengals and the Dolphins. So this is not really a spot where I want to target anyone. Not really someone that, given the prices, maybe Alvin Kamara. If his ownership is depressed, maybe you want to take a shot. But I feel like there's much better spots on this slate, particularly the next game, which I'll get to. So yeah, I'm off that game. Detroit and Chicago. This probably is one of my favorite games on this slate, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be going to Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky came back against Green Bay. Okay, he had 3 touchdowns. Now, Chicago's defense is really good. They kind of held Rodgers for the most part. They did what they could with Rodgers, right? Green Bay still put up 41. You're not going to stop Aaron Rodgers, right? They just have so many weapons. But Mitchell Trubisky was able in the second half to get things going, So I really like them. They got David Montgomery back last week. I really was hoping to get low-owned David Montgomery again. I mean, last week was an amazing matchup for them. First play of the game, David Montgomery breaks off a 57-yard run. and he got 6 targets, 5 receptions, and towards the end of the game, he really paid off. I kind of hope that I was hoping that he wouldn't get that touchdown at the end of the game, because that's really going to inflate his value or inflate his ownership on this slate. David Johnson is in a really good spot this week. Detroit is better against the pass catching running back, although they are still giving up, some work to the running backs, like we saw on Thanksgiving. Duke Johnson went for 17 points against Detroit, right? And he's not even that good, but he did get a passing touchdown. So I do like David Montgomery this week. I feel like 5,500. He's kind of the player where even if he gets you, they also played game one earlier this year. He went for 13 and 64, 3 targets. He only put up 8.4, but he's cheaper now, and they seem to be using him a little bit more. So, there is ways that he could fail, but I feel like with the matchup, given where this matchup, given how bad Detroit's been lately, the matchup is just really, really good for David Montgomery. It's not a spot that I really want to ignore. So I'm kind of jamming him in. Overall, for me, he's actually one of the first people that I want to get into my lineups. Allen Robinson should get a lot of ownership this week, too. We saw as soon as Trubisky came back, Robinson, he went from 9 targets to 13 targets and, 2 touchdowns. So Trubisky is looking for Allen Robinson. Now, one thing that, if you do see Trubisky's ownership a little higher this week, that'll kind of mean that, Allen Robinson's ownership probably will be up there as well. A lot of the optimizers are projecting Allen Robinson as the number 1 receiver this week. So, some people are kind of stacking Montgomery and Robinson along with Trubisky. I feel like that stack becomes really expensive at that price. For me, Detroit is really bad against the deep passes. We saw, Will Fuller torched them down the left side of the field twice, right? For just 2 wide open touchdowns. He had like a 56-yarder and like a 40-yarder or something. He had some really, really big touchdowns. He had a big game against them, right? Will Fuller, he had a 40-yard touchdown, 6 catches, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He just had a monster game against them. So I feel people are kind of looking at Allen Robinson this week and kind of looking at what Will Fuller did last week and kind of looking at that, looking for Allen Robinson to kind of do something kind of along those lines. I really feel like, though, Darnell Mooney this week, he had 9 targets last week against Green Bay. Now, granted, they were playing from behind. They were looking for Mooney, and he did get some deep shots down the field. So he's a really low-owned piece that I kind of like this week to kind of make everything fit. 3,400, 9 targets. He's getting the volume, and he's getting the deep passes, which is something that I really, really like. Again, this is an earlier look. I'll kind of readdress and kind of get back to it as the week progresses. I'll probably have another video Saturday night, once I've kind of broken down everything. But I really like Darnell Mooney. At this price, I feel like it's hard for him to fail. Even if he gets you 4 catches for 40 yards, it doesn't kill you at 3,400, So he's someone I'm looking to get into my lineup. And again, for me, the number 1 quarterback this week is, I really like Aaron Rodgers, and I'll kind of get to that when I get to that game. But I really want to take Trubisky because he's cheap enough to where I feel like it lets me get to those running backs that I want to get to. And I'll kind of get to the next running back that I want to get to as well. We see week 1 against Detroit, he put up 24 points, 3 touchdowns. While I don't expect him to put up 24, a 20-point performance, even a 19-20 doesn't kill you. We've seen in the last few weeks, the top-tier quarterbacks, when they're not on the slate, 20 to 25 points is kind of getting it done for you. And this week we're seeing, Russell Wilson had a horrible game against Philly. And, I'll get to that game shortly, but Kyler Murray's injured. Deshaun Watson just lost Will Fuller, and Justin Herbert's going against New England. Rodgers, I'll get to. Kirk Cousins, I'll get to. But I'll kind of explain why I like Mitchell Trubisky this week, right? So let's go back to the Detroit-Chicago. On the Detroit side, I really like TJ Hawkinson. I feel like he's a great play. We saw, against Chicago on Monday Night Football, I think it was, right, or Sunday Night Football, we saw Robert Tonyan just burn them down the middle of the field. And we also saw against Houston, Hawkinson, on the first drive, he had like 67 yards. So they are looking to get the ball to Hawkinson deep down the middle of the field. I really like him this week. I think he's a great play. I think he's a great run back. if I'm running it back with these players, right? I really like Hawkinson on the Detroit side. Swift is out. There's some news that came out earlier this week that said, with after the concussion, Swift's kind of not been himself. He's telling Adrian Peterson that he's not really feeling himself. So that's kind of concerning. Without Swift there, are they going to be able to move the ball? But we saw last week they were able to get points against Houston. While Chicago is a really, really tough defense, maybe they are still able to move the ball. Kenny Galladay is still questionable. Didn't practice Thursday. Doesn't look like he's going to go again. They might have Amendola back, and they might have Marvin Jones. I think they have Marvin Jones back. So I think they are going to be able to still move the ball. But out of the entire receiving core of this team, I feel like Hawkinson is one of the people that I want to target. Now Chicago's really given up a lot down. They're giving up 60% more than league average down the middle of the field. So I feel like it's a good matchup for Hawkinson as well. We saw in the first game that they played, he put up 16 points and 5 for 56 and a touchdown. While I don't expect him to get this kind of numbers again, it's not unreasonable because he's been putting up, aside from that Washington's a good defense, he's been putting up 15, 16, 14, 15, 16. I really like Hawkinson as a run back on these, on this Chicago stack. So let's get to the next game. Again, my targets, my main target this week is the Detroit and Chicago game. I really like that scenario. As of right now, it's kind of the game that I'm leaning to the most. Washington Pitt's postponed, but yeah, that's the game I'm leading to the most. Now, Jacksonville and Minnesota is another game that I really, really like. The Jacksonville, this is a 51 point over under. I think it's the second highest on the slate aside from the Browns and Tennessee, right? So Jacksonville Jaguars and Vikings and the Colts and Texans are also 51, right? So I really like the this game environment for the Jags. Dalvin Cook, we saw last week, he kind of got injured. He was chalk last week, and I full faded him against Carolina. The reason why I did that last week is 9,500. Like I said, anytime you're paying $9,000 or over for a player, they need to have a perfect game. And I felt like against Carolina's been better against the run as the season's gone on, and they had, even though they didn't have Thielen, I felt like, okay, if they don't have Thielen, it's going to kind of adjust the way the defense operates. Like I was saying with, when I was mentioning the Houston game, anytime your offense loses a player, it kind of changes the dynamic of the way the offense operates, right? It doesn't open up the same kind of looks, the same kind of holes that you have before because you have those receivers drawing coverage. So that's kind of why I was off Dalvin Cook last week. I feel like Dalvin Cook this week is going to be chalk again. He may be fairly highly owned again. Jacksonville this season, while a lot of people think Jacksonville is not bad against the run, they're 14th against the run, against adjusted line yards, right? They're stuffing the quarterback at, they're ranked 9th out of 32, second in the league, stuffing the running back at 20% clip. They are, allowing 4.42 yards to the running back, but adjusted line yards are 4.18. And I feel like this is a game where if they get behind, they're still going to use Dalvin Cook, but I feel like at that 9,500 point, we saw last week that Justin Jefferson was able to still get passes, Justin Jefferson was still able to kind of get passes and get a couple touchdowns for them. Now, they do have Adam Thielen back this week as well. Justin Jefferson's price has creeped up to 6,900. Thielen is 7,300. This is kind of a spot where this game could kind of be a shootout. But the running back is kind of just too expensive for me to want to go there. Now, we'll find out. He was a limited participant on Thursday. This could also be a spot where, if he's limited, I don't think, even though Minnesota is, trying to get into a playoff spot, I don't think this is a spot where they're just going to push Dalvin Cook for 30 touches, right? They could work in Alexander Madison. So I would kind of be wary with that here. Kirk Cousins, he hasn't been throwing the ball as much, but last week against Carolina, he did throw it 45 times and he did go off for a great game. Jacksonville is actually not. Let me look at how they are against the pass. So Jacksonville is actually 18th against the 31st overall against the pass, but they're giving up a lot of deep down the right side of the field and deep down the left side of the field. So I feel like in a contrarian spot, if you're not playing Dalvin Cook, you could take a shot on Kirk Cousins and one of the receivers here. I feel like those could be good plays. But it's not a spot where I'm going. Just given the price, like 7,300, 6,900, and 6,400. For the price of the stack, it's really expensive. Everyone on Minnesota is kind of expensive here, right? And the way to win a GPP is kind of to take advantage of the price and see, okay, who can actually get you the most upside for the price. Like Kirk Cousins 6,400, you can get Aaron Rodgers for 6,800. So he's just way too expensive for me to want to take a shot on. Even Dalvin Cook's kind of expensive, and I'm not really playing Thielen and Jefferson as one-offs because I don't really know who's the one there, right? Like it's Jefferson one week, it's Thielen one week, it's Cook one week. Irv Smith Jr. didn't practice today; he's still questionable. So this is just overall like a side where I'm not really interested. Now Jacksonville, this is a play that I think is going to be my overall number one play of the week, and it's right up there with that David Montgomery. James Robinson. James Robinson has been getting massive workload, right? 23 touches, 25 touches. This last week against Cleveland, 28 touches, and it's the reason why I really like Derrick Henry. Like he had 22 rushing attempts and he had 6 targets. Now, their offensive line, Jacksonville's offensive line, they're 5th in the league, right? They're getting stuffed at only 3. They're 3rd out of 32, only 13% of the time. So we have the first offensive line, like best offensive line rushing wise is Minnesota. Second is Tennessee, and this is they're ranked 5th at 4.77. But for the amount of volume they're getting, I really like. You have Cleveland, which is up there, but Cleveland's getting stuffed at 21% of the time. You have New England, which is doing really well against their 4th, and then you have Jacksonville, the 5th. So as far as stuff rate goes, I love James Robinson, right? Like they're only getting stuffed 13.9% of the time. They're getting 4.77 yards per carry. And Minnesota has actually been sneakily bad against the run. Their stuff rate is 27th out of 32. They're only stuffing the running back 12.8%. They're 28th in the league against the rush, 4.74 yards per carry. Even though they're better against the short passes, I feel like this is a spot where James Robinson will still get a couple passes and they will be able to move the ball. Now, DJ Chark is questionable. Limited practice. I expect him to go this week. He didn't play last week. We don't know. I think Mike Lennon is actually starting this week. Mike Lennon actually had a really good game last week against Cleveland. So Mike Lennon at 4,800 is actually a great play as well. So this is a kind of a sneaky spot where I feel like where Jacksonville stacks could be in the millionaire lineups, right? I really like Mike Lennon against Minnesota. Now Minnesota early on in the year, they were 15th against, or they were 30th against the deep pass. They've moved up against the deep pass to 15th now. They are 8th against the short passes. They're still giving up a lot deep down the middle of the field and deep down the right side of the field. So I feel like a lot of people played Keelan Cole last week. They played Chenault. They really didn't hit for them. I feel like this is a spot where they really could hit for them. But for me, like the number one target for me this week is James Robinson. He's also a significant, he's at 7,300. For the workload that he's getting, we're literally paying $9,000 for Derrick Henry for that, or $9,500 for Cook. He is just way too cheap for the workload, and I really like the matchup. Again, the reason I like Henry is also because the matchup is solid, So I really like plugging in James Robinson in this spot. I feel like this Jacksonville and Minnesota games could be a really, really good target spot. Now, let's move on to Miami and Cincinnati. Now, Tua practiced this week. I don't know if he's still going to be the QB or if it's going to be Fitzpatrick. I really like Fitzpatrick better in this spot, right? Cincinnati has not been great against the run. They are, right now, against the pass, Cincinnati, against the short pass, they're 25th. Against the deep pass, they're 8th, right? Short passes, they're giving up plenty short left, short right, and they're giving plenty deep left and deep right, right? So they're also giving up a lot against to the running backs, right? But the running backs essentially on Miami right now are maybe Ahmed is back. But Miami's offensive line, their rushing, their for their rushing line is 24th. They're getting stuff 30th out of 32 in the league, 19.6%. So I really don't like the running game here, potentially in Miami. I like the passing game more. Now, another one of my targets for this week is going to be Devontae Parker, right? I played him last week, and I was kind of frustrated at the beginning, right? Because we're like, where's his targets? But he had 14 targets last week, right? And he's 6,400. When you're paying 6,900 or 7,300 for Jefferson, who are splitting targets, I feel like you could just go with Devontae Parker, right? He's getting you those targets. The matchup is actually really good against Cincinnati, and it's a contrarian kind of move because a lot of people are going to be playing against Cincinnati. They're going to be playing the defense, and they're going to be playing the running backs. So I feel like Devontae Parker is going to get plenty of those short passes. Like, he even scored a touchdown last week, and he still put up 22 points. He's 5,900. He's gone up obviously $500 in price, but I feel like this is a good spot for him again, where he can kind of like just dominate and just rack up the yards and those passes, right? Essentially, to win a GPP, you want like that 4 to 5x, right? And getting 4x, would be like 24 to 25 points. And I feel like Devontae Parker can do that. Same thing with Landry. Like, these are two number one receivers who are not really competing against like so many other receivers for touches. I mean, you have Jakeem Grant there, but he's more of their inside receiver. He's not really playing the outside. So I really, really like Devontae Parker and Landry this week. Mooney, to an extent, I do like Allen Robinson. Like, we'll adjust this lineup, and we'll kind of see, because you do need to give up some salary somewhere. We'll kind of adjust and see if, maybe if we can afford Henry. And I think that's going to kind of be the narrative of the week is, can you really afford to get Henry in your lineups, or even get someone like a Dalvin Cook in your lineup, because there are plenty of good spots on this slate, right? So Miami, I personally, I just like the Devontae Parker. We saw Gesicki finally come back to life last week. It was a much better matchup for him, but still only 5 targets, and it's 4,200. It's not a bad price, but it's not someone that I'm really targeting here. And I think that's it for the Dolphins side. I'm not really interested in playing the Dolphins defense. Dolphins are the worst in the league against the run, and that's kind of why I like Frank Gore last week. Is, first off, I thought, okay, Frank Gore might not get the game script. They might not be in their favor. But again, he still got 18 touches last week for 74 yards, and they still won, or they lost 20-3. But it wasn't like Miami just came out and dominated them like some 40-5 to whatever. So I feel like it's gonna be, if it's the defense, right? Last week against the Jets, they put up 14 points at 4,400. That's pretty expensive, Like, I'd rather take a shot on a cheaper defense and kind of just see what fits. Sometimes, some weeks I really like to pay up for defenses that I feel like are in good spots. Sometimes it's Washington or Pittsburgh. But on this particular week, I'm kind of like more targeting just the players that I want, kind of seeing what else I can fit in. Cincinnati, someone who's no one's talking about is Giovanni Bernard. He's in a good spot this week. Like I said earlier, Miami is one of the worst in the rushing rate. He might go really under-owned. It's someone that I'm light on right now, but I feel like this could be a really, really good spot for him. Let me take a look at their matchup. So Cincinnati's offensive line is 31st in the league. They're getting stuffed 20% of the time behind the line of scrimmage. So they just don't have a great offensive line. Now you also have Joe Burrow out for the year. It's just their offense it's just been stagnant ever since Joe Burrow's been gone, We don't know if Brandon Allen or Ryan Finley is starting. So, I mean, I think just all in all, the receivers are just out of play. They're super cheap, though. These are receivers against, Miami, against these are receivers a few weeks ago that we saw at prices like, almost $6,000. So they are really underpriced. This is a good contrarian spot, I feel like. If you feel like, Cincinnati can keep this game close, I feel like these are some contrarian plays that you can take shots on. Now, Miami against the pass, they're really good. Miami's been good all the way through. They're giving up some down the short middle of the field and some deep down the right side of the field. So those are two really standout numbers to me, is short middle and deep right. Short down the middle tells me that this might be like more of like a Tyler Boyd, and deep right tells me this could be like a T. Higgins type game or even AJ Green. So these, keep an eye on this. I mean, I may not end up getting here, but like I may regret it, because I feel like this could be a really sneaky spot for Giovanni Bernard to get some of these short targets, and maybe Green to catch a long touchdown. I'll kind of keep an eye on it as the week goes on and kind of see, if I want to maybe take a shot on something like this. I don't know how many lineups I plan to run out just yet, but this might be a spot where you can kind of get a little contrarian. Other than that, Devontae Parker is kind of the only one I want from this game. The Giants at Seattle. Now, Seattle, we saw them on Monday Night Football. They came out and ran the ball almost 30 times. Chris Carson had 8 attempts, and we had Wayne Gallman. Carlos Hyde rushed the ball 15 times. So 23 times they rushed the ball. Now, it was a difficult run defense against Philly. Russell Wilson just wasn't throwing the ball, and Pete Carroll, they kind of hinted a few weeks ago that they want to come out and start rushing the ball a little bit more. And you've seen, as a result, Russell Wilson's attempts, going from 40, 35, they've kind of dropped off a cliff. He didn't have a great game against Philly. It was a tough matchup for him. But this is a spot where, again, the Giants are not great. They have Colt McCoy starting this week. Colt McCoy, is that it? Yeah, Colt McCoy starting this week. I guess he's not bad. I really don't know much about him. I don't remember. I mean, he's been around the league for a while, but I just don't really remember much about, playing Colt McCoy, how long he's been a while. I think he was on the Redskins for a while, or on the football team a while ago. But I really don't know, right? So Daniel Jones is questionable on this game. If Daniel Jones was in, I really like Darius Slayton, Shepard. All of these receivers are all questionable. We don't know kind of how this game is shaking out, but this is something to keep an eye on. I think the best out of all of them is Evan Ingram. I think he's in a good spot this week. I've been burned by this guy plenty of times this season, so I'm a little hesitant going back here, but I feel like he's in a good spot this week. Seattle hasn't been great against the pass. They've been much better against the rush this year. Against the pass, they're ranked 29th in the league. They're giving up plenty of deep left, deep middle, deep right, and short middle. So short middle and deep middle is kind of like a really good matchup for me, for Evan Ingram. However, you're also getting Shepard getting targeted significantly since he's been back. 8 targets last week. He's fairly cheap at this $5,300 price. So this is something I'm really going to consider, because even $6,200 and $6,400 is a little expensive for me. But those are clear number ones, for me on those teams. So if I'm considering going with the Seattle game, targeting the Seattle game, I may want to take some shots potentially on a Slayton for the deep targets, maybe Evan Ingram and a Colt McCoy. But I don't really think I'm going to play Colt McCoy, and that's kind of what makes me hesitant on this whole Giants side. But I really like Evan Ingram this week. On the Seattle side, last week I said I liked Tyler Lockett, but we saw them move DK Metcalf around a lot. And, this week, short passes against the Giants, the Giants are ranked 30th against the short pass. So they're giving up plenty short left, short middle, and some deep down the middle and deep down the right side of the field. I feel like this game, again, could be a Tyler Lockett game. But the way the things are going, the way that the stuff played out last week, I really don't know about the Seattle offense anymore. I feel like, at any time they could come out and rush. Their identity's kind of changing as the season goes on. And I think we're seeing as a result of them trying to slow down the tempo. Russ had to come out and cook, so many weeks because they were getting behind. They were getting these shootouts, and their defense couldn't stop anybody, and their offense needed to put up points. So I feel like now what we're going to see going forward, especially if Seattle wants to make a deep run into the playoffs, they're going to need to kind of tone down their game a little bit. They're going to need to run the ball a little bit more, run more effectively, run a little screens, some play action. And we might not see that high-powered offense that, Russell Wilson throwing it 40 times a game, So I would really temper my expectations on Seattle going forward. We saw Russell Wilson had a great, opening to the season, but he's just been mediocre the last few weeks. Aside from that Buffalo game, against the Rams, he was terrible. Against Arizona, the second time around, he only threw it 28 times. Against Philly, he wasn't great. And the Giants haven't been. I mean, they've been pretty good against the deep pass, not great against the short pass. But this could be a game. Again, you could see Russell Wilson throw it to Chris Carson or Carlos Hyde for a touchdown, or someone like them, rushing for a touchdown. So I'm not really targeting this game yet. I'll kind of break it down a little further and see if it's somewhere where I want to take some shots. As of right now, I'm not really targeting it. The Giants and their over-under is 47.5, and the Giants are underdogs by about 10 points. I feel like this game could be closer, but it's going to depend on who's active and who's out. Right. Next game, Arizona and the Rams. We saw last week. Last week I was on Kenyon Drake 100%, and the reason is New England has not been good against the run all year long, and they've been sneaky about it. Right. He had 22 attempts. He had 2 1-yard touchdowns. He had a couple big runs. 24 points. He actually did very well last week at 5,400. This is a spot where the total on this game, the Rams and the Cardinals, it's 48. It's a lower game. I feel like you're going to see more of a defensive approach in this game. Kyler Murray injured his shoulder. We saw last week he rushed only 5 times for 31 yards, but New England tends to take away your bigger threats, So I knew, okay, with the shoulder injury, with the I feel like he was a little banged up. Like he came up hobbling that one game against Seattle, he came up hobbling on one play. I felt like he wasn't going to rush the ball as much, and I felt like, Bill Belichick is good enough to take away your best receiver on the outside, to take away Hopkins. So I felt like this was a game where if they were going to force, if Arizona was going to beat them, they were going to force Arizona to run the ball. And that was something that you saw Arizona not really do this entire year. That's why people were so frustrated with Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, is because Kyler Murray kept rushing for touchdowns every single week. That's kind of the reason why I played Kenyon Drake last week, because I felt like that was the game script that was going to be that I felt like was going to take place. This particular week against the Rams are really good against the pass, right? Rams this season are they're 4th against the pass. Now they're giving up short passes, like short left, short middle. They're not really giving up anything deep. They're number 1 against the deep pass, right? So someone like Christian Kirk on the Arizona side this week is out. Hopkins could get those short passes. I feel like this is going to be a tough game overall for the offense. You could see Chase Edmonds actually get some targets. I feel like at 4,900, if you wanted to take a shot at Chase Edmonds, the Rams, they're middle of the pack against the run. So this could be another Kenyon Drake spot, right? So they're only 26th in stuff rate out of 32, and they're giving up 4.49 yards per carry. Now Arizona's offensive line is they're only getting stuffed at 4. They're 4th and getting stuffed, so they're 14.2%, which is pretty good out of 32, and they're getting 4.22 yards a carry. So I feel like this could be another sneaky spot for Kenyon Drake. He had 22 touches last game, by far his highest of the season. I feel like this could be another spot where he's underpriced. This could be a Kenyon Drake game. So this is someone I'm kind of going to look at again because of the short passes, because of their ability to rush. And because of, they're not really giving up so much receivers, I might take a much closer look at Kenyon Drake this week. I kind of feel like I overlooked him earlier. Definitely not going to do that now. I feel like he's in a really, really good spot this week. Kenyon Drake from this Arizona side, because I'm going to keep an eye on. The Rams. The Rams are a mess, man. 10 rushing attempts from Cam Akers. He gets a touchdown. 10 rushing attempts from Henderson. 10 rushing attempts from Brown. This is a freaking mess. This is like another Indy. They got 3 running backs. They got 2 tight ends. They got 4 receivers. We saw Van Jefferson catch a touchdown last week. For me, for the Rams, every single week it's figuring out who it's going to be. Is it going to be Robert Woods? Is it going to be Josh Reynolds? Overall, this is just a mess. Arizona's pretty good against the run. They're in the middle of the pack, 4.32 yards a carry. So I'm not really going to the running backs because it's a mess here. If I'm targeting someone on this side of the team against the Arizona defense, Arizona is the second against the deep pass, right? They're 21st against the short pass. So it's their defenses are built very similarly. Both their cornerbacks on both sides are good in this game. Both are pretty bad against the short. So they're giving up plenty of short passes down the middle. Now, if that's the case, I feel like it could be a Cooper Kupp week, right? Like he's getting those short passes, the low A dot, heavy, just like crossing routes. It also could be a Higbee or an Everett. For me, I just want in this game, I would be targeting the defenses, and particularly I think this is a Kenyon Drake week. So something to keep an eye on. If you're playing multiple lineups, I think you definitely want to get some exposure to Kenyon Drake here. Philly and Green Bay, and then New England and the Chargers. These two games I feel like are going to be the higher targeted games on the slate, right? We're an hour in. I'm sorry, I told you guys it's going to be a long video, but I kind of want to give you guys the best information that you guys need to kind of break down your lineups, right? Philly and Green Bay. Now, here's the thing with Philly. Here's the thing with Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is really, really cheap this week, right? He only threw it 29 times against Chicago and still put up 25 fantasy points. This is a really, really good spot for Aaron Rodgers. The issue is Philly is really bad against the short pass. They're good against the run. They're good at getting pressure on the quarterback. Green Bay's offensive line. Green Bay's offensive line, they're fourth in adjusted sack rate. They're getting a 4.57 yards per carry. They're not getting stuffed. This is a spot where Green Bay could run the ball. Maybe not effectively, but they could run the ball. And, Philly is giving up plenty of deep passes. They're 31st against the deep pass and 29th against the short middle. They're giving 182.9% down the middle of the field. This is the problem for me with Green Bay. Is it going to be Tanyan down the middle? Is it going to be Lazard? Is it going to be Scantling? Is it going to be Equanimeous St. Brown? I don't know. This is the problem, right? Like, we saw Marquez Valdez-Scantling come to life a few weeks ago, right? Get those big 78-yard touchdown against Jacksonville down the middle, 27 points, and then done nothing. He didn't even get targeted the last game, right? That's because Lazard's back. Lazard at 5,000 is really, really cheap. He took a big hit at the end of the game on Monday Night Football, I think it was. Devontae Adams, $9,000. Now, this is another spot where it makes me feel guilty not playing Devontae Adams, but how are you going to play $9,000 for a receiver they have four other targets? Now, Devontae Adams has a great matchup. He can beat any receivers. In my opinion, he's the best route runner in the NFL, period. Like, there's no one that's runs routes like Devontae Adams. Overall, he is the number one receiver in my eyes. He can go out and get you 40 any given week. We've seen him do it multiple times this season against Minnesota, against Houston, against San Francisco. He can do it, but the thing is Rodgers going to need to do it against Philly. Philly's offense has been anemic, right? They were barely able. They got that that Hail Mary touchdown to Richard Rodgers. This is a spot for Miles Sanders to go off. Now, there's a couple different ways this particular game can go, right? Philly and Green Bay, you could approach this game like it's going to be a shootout, right? You want to take Rodgers, you want to take maybe Adams, and you want to run it back with Philly, right? Because this is the best matchup, arguably, for a running back, right? We saw David Montgomery had a big game with them. The problem with Philly is that we saw Boston Scott actually outscore Miles Sanders. Boston Scott got 6 targets, 2 attempts. We saw Miles Sanders 6 attempts, 3 targets, right? Boston Scott actually outscored Miles Sanders in the last game, and we saw Corey Clement get in there for like almost a 1-yard touchdown, which is so annoying, right? This is the problem with this Philly team, is that everything is spread out. We had some rumblings last week. Jalen Hurts might potentially play. Philly can, given the how weak their division is, they can still get into the playoffs, I think, right? So I don't know if really they're gonna go out there and say, okay, let's give Miles Sanders 25 touches, or if they're gonna lose this game, maybe you see more Boston Scott. So this is a game where I feel like if you really feel like you want to play Green Bay, you take Green Bay sides, and then you run it back with either Miles Sanders or potentially a Dallas Goedert. So Dallas Goedert, we saw, he had a big game against Seattle. That's kind of why also I liked Evan Ingram in the last game. Those deep passes down the middle. He had a big game against Seattle, so he's their number one target now. The thing is Green Bay's defense is good, right? Green Bay right now against the pass, they're giving up only 8% down the middle. They're 11th against the deep pass, 18th against short pass. So I feel like this is going to be a much more difficult spot for Philly, right? You also got Aaron Jones there on Green Bay, who hasn't had a touchdown all freaking month, right? But given how bad Indy has been, given how bad Philly has been against the pass catching running backs, this is a spot against the short pass. This is a spot where you can see Aaron Jones take one to the house, right? In the passing game, you can see Aaron Jones go for 2 touchdowns. Rodgers throws for 2. I feel like this offense, again, I'm going to keep reiterating this, is that I want to, target offenses that are condensed. This offense is really, really spread out. It could be Rodgers, it could be Jones, it could be Adams, it could be Lazard. We saw Tonyan catch like that 40-yard touchdown down the middle, right? So it could even be Tonyan. I think Tonyan's actually a good play at 3,700. It's like if you're running 150 lineups, you want pieces of this entire, pieces of the entire offense. Like the Packers defense is in a good spot against Philly. Philly's given up a lot of sacks. They're worst in the league, and Green Bay's getting a lot of pressure on the running back. So you could do like a Packers and Aaron Jones stack. But you see what I mean? Like this kind of game is that there's just so many options of where the points can come from, and not that many from the Philly side, where I feel like this is kind of a stay away game for me. Initially I liked it. I like playing Tonyan, but for me right now that I think about it, it's kind of like a stay away because Green Bay can just roll on Philly, and it's tough to see them keep this game close. And I'll get to that. That's the issue that I have with the next game also, right? The Chargers and the Patriots. Now, everyone, when I built my Saber lineup, I had either Frank Gore or Eckler in there. We saw Eckler go off last week for a huge, huge game. I mean, he had 16 targets. That's nuts. He almost had a 1-yard touchdown as well against Buffalo. But the problem for me with the Chargers is the same issue that I have with Green Bay. The offense is really spread out. With the Chargers, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Eckler? We had Joshua Kelly, who turned up last week for 7 attempts, and he got a 1-yard touchdown. It's so frustrating, right? Because when you're paying $7,100 for these studs, you want to know that they're getting the goal line work, and that's kind of why I really like James Robinson, and I like Derrick Henry, because those are the guys that are getting the touchdowns. They're getting the end zone carries, right? People are going to be on Austin Eckler, but like I said last week, I played Kenyon Drake against New England because I knew what New England was going to do, right? I was like, okay, I kind of figured that they're going to take away their number one option. Here, the number one option's in the slot. You got Keenan Allen at 8,100. He still had 10 targets, right? But he's out of the slot. To take away someone out of the slot, I feel like it's going to be a lot more difficult. Like, New England's horrible against the short passes down the middle of the field, and they're horrible. They're pretty good against the deep passes. They're horrible against the short passes down the middle of the field, and they're horrible against the running back. So, in my opinion, it's going to be Keenan Allen and it's going to be Eckler. If you want to take a shot on this game, you say, okay, I want to stack Eckler, Keenan Allen, and Herbert. I think that's a viable route to go, right? But what if Mike Williams catches a deep touchdown? Jalen Guyton, who I've been playing the last few weeks, came in and got 3. I think he had an offensive pass interference on the last play of the game, which was like 30 or 40-yard touchdown, but he's been getting more snaps. And I like the thing that makes me hesitant again with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, they're going to look at the tape and they know where the targets are going. They know who Herbert's throwing to, and the defense is going to adjust. So I like Eckler this week. Initially, he was my number one play. But after looking at it, and 7,100, there's no way that I think he's going to get 16 targets again. I just don't see it. He had his first, or he didn't have a touchdown last week, right? He had 14 attempts for 44 yards, and I feel like, okay, if Balaj is, I think Balaj was out last week, right? If Balaj is limited or even plays, you still have the chance that Kelly comes in and vultures a touchdown, Pope comes in and vultures a touchdown. I think Eckler was a good play, but I feel like there's better ways to go. It's if I'm going to spend 7,100, I want to spend it on a top tier receiver that's going to get those targets. I'd rather play $7,000 Alvin Kamara than a $7,100 Eckler. It's really really expensive for Austin Eckler. On the New England side, the Chargers are pretty bad against the deep pass, and deep left, deep middle, deep right, and the short middle. So I really initially liked Jacoby Myers, but there's Bird there as well, who's been getting some of the deeper targets as well. The problem is, again, Cam doesn't throw it much, right? He's questionable this week. He's thrown it 18 times last week against Arizona, 17. He's not throwing the ball well. And again, if they're able to shut down Keenan Allen, this game could be a lot lower scoring than I think people think it could be. Right now, the over-under on this game, 47.5, 1 point spread. They anticipate this game to be close, but I think it could be, if it's a 3 touchdown on each side and a couple of field goals, you got to figure out, okay, no one's really going off for that monster game and breaking the slate and getting you that ceiling that you need to win a tournament. So this is a particular game I'm off of. I'm not really on Eckler. If I do play it, it'll probably be in a stack with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has been throwing the ball well, but it's not someone where I really want to target. So after reviewing that, you guys kind of see why I'm breaking down the slate. Like Russell Wilson, there's issues with him there. There's people running. They want to run the ball and, slow the tempo down a little bit. Kyler Murray, he's a little banged up. Arizona's good against the deep pass. They're not great against the short pass. Deshaun Watson, again, they lost Will Fuller. They lost their cornerback. You could argue that, okay, they lost their cornerback. Indy's going to score a bunch of points. Deshaun Watson's going to need to throw. Indy's a tough defense, right? I mean, I know last week they got annihilated, but I don't think that, Houston is that powerful to drop that many points on Indy. Herbert, again, New England is a tough. It's a tough team in terms of coaching, right? Like, it's not necessarily a tough team on paper, but you got to figure out, okay, where can they possibly adjust, right? And if they're giving up those middles, maybe they move their corners, their safeties, and their linebackers in, and they leave the outsides, right? And they leave man coverage on the outside, right? And they play like one-on-one on the outside, and they let Mike Williams. They force Herbert to throw it to Mike Williams, and you see defense come up with a couple picks, right? Throw it to Jalen Guyton. Force Herbert to actually throw the ball downfield rather than just dump off, because we saw last week, and we know that New England saw just dump offs. Like when they're looking at tape, they're studying all week. People get they look at stuff like sometimes I make lineups and I'll post it, and they'll say it's Tuesday. Well, yeah, on Tuesday, you're still looking at lineups. So, it doesn't matter if it's Tuesday in the week, because all of these NFL teams, they're preparing for one game the entire week. We're preparing for 12, in this case, 11 games the entire week. You want to do the best job you can that'll give your lineups the best chance to succeed, right? So that's kind of why I feel like, okay, I want to break down the slate, go game by game, take the time, and really understand what it is that we're looking at and why that I'm on certain players and why I'm not, right? Aaron Rodgers, phenomenal spot, right? But my problem with Aaron Rodgers is who you're going to pair him with, right? Devontae Adams is really expensive. Lazard's in a good spot. Aaron Jones is in a good spot. And Tanyan's in a good spot. So if you're going to play those, you figure out if you want to play Rodgers, then you stack it with a couple different people. And then you say, okay, I want to play Miles Sanders on the other side, right? The thing with that is also if Green Bay gets ahead, is Philly really going to be able to keep it close? If you want to play it, it's a good spot for Philly running game, right? Like play Miles Sanders, play it with Boston Scott, play different variations, right? But if you're playing 1 to 3 lineups, right, then maybe you don't want to go there. Maybe you want to take a little more sure thing, right? Ben Roethlisberger postponed. Kirk Cousins, I kind of went over that. He's really expensive for the amount that he's throwing it. He has that upside, but I don't really need 6,400 for 30. I'd rather spend that money on a receiver, right? Taysom Hill, he has that rushing upside. You could play Taysom Hill in this spot. I think he'll be lower owned, than he was 2 weeks ago. Sneaky spot to play him. Tannehill, I kind of went through that. I like him. I liked him earlier in the week. I'm not really on him because I'm on Henry. And Fitzpatrick, I think he's in a really good spot. I just feel like, okay, if they're going to move the ball methodically down the field, maybe Fitzpatrick gets one touchdown, but I just want the volume. I want them to move the ball with Devontae Parker down the field. That's why I like Devontae Parker, right? Derek Carr, great bounce back spot. I feel like this is a spot where I may want to take some shots on Derek Carr if Josh Jacobs is out. And that's kind of it. I mean, Carson Wentz, I'm not really on. That's kind of where I'm at quarterback. On running back, like I told you guys, Henry, he's priced for perfection. He's got to put a perfect game, but this is a spot where I feel like he's going to do it. And the talk that came out with him potentially, getting those touches in the passing game, I feel like it's a good play. I love Montgomery. The matchup is great against Detroit. I really like it. Darnell Mooney, like this lineup obviously will be adjusted. I still can't afford to pay for a defense, but I really like the running backs here, right? Like I like that they're getting a majority of touches and they're getting the goal line work. That's the reason why I like this lineup. So I'll show you guys a couple quick lineups that I build. So this was the lineup earlier in the week, okay? It was Tannehill, Montgomery, Frank Gore, A.J. Brown, Landry, Jacoby Myers, Hawkinson, Nelson Aguilar, and Dolphins, right? This was like I was telling you guys, this is what I was on earlier in the week. And as I researched, this is kind of what I moved to, right? So I like Trubisky, Henry, Montgomery. I have Robinson, Parker, Landry, Mooney, and then I kind of had Goddard and the Jets defense. Now, the take here is Jets defense is 2,100, right? So they're super cheap to where if they can get me a couple picks, or whatever it is, a couple sacks, that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for, I'm looking for Josh Jacobs potentially not to play and Nelson Aguilar not to play. And just, I think Las Vegas may have a tougher time moving the ball against the Jets, right? Jets' run defense is really good. Derek Carr hasn't been good against the pass recently, so that's the idea. And with Goddard, it's just, okay, if they get behind, they're going to have to throw the ball. We know it's the number one target for them. At 4,300, he's still a little cheap. So I like him. But honestly, I would like to get to Hawkinson here. So I may have to pay down here. Like I said, I did like Mike Lennon against Jacksonville, right? Maybe you it's not something that I really want to do, but if I really want to focus on getting Henry, Montgomery, and Robinson in my lineup, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices. So that's it, guys. That's my breakdown for this week. I know the video was really long. I hope I'm thankful for you guys that stayed with it. If you guys liked the video, like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you guys got some information from it. Let me know if you guys have any input. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys would like to see, what other things I can do to kind of help you guys out. Like I said, I recommend getting on PFF, Pro Football Focus, to kind of look at where you can kind of see the matchup charts for where they're receiving the targets. And then a couple projection sites are good. Projections, like I said, they matter until they don't. You want some stability in your lineup, also some upsides depending on the tournament you're playing, right? I'll do another video at some point about choosing, specific tournaments that work for you and playing, 150 lineups versus playing 3 lineups. I just like to play my best lineups, right? I know people, they want all different variations, so they have all their bases covered. I like to just pick a couple and go on with that. And if you're a mass multiplayer, if you want to get really good at it, the key is making more lineups, right? The key is really playing on these smaller level stakes, building 150 lineups, and then adjusting your process as time goes on. But for me, I like to just choose the best plays that I feel, and the process that works for me is just playing 3 or 4 lineups, because I noticed the more lineups I make, I kind of want exposure to different things. Whereas necessarily, like, where if I make 3 or 4 lineups, it forces me to choose who I really want, and it really shows myself who I'm on this week, right? As opposed to just having exposures higher or lower on the board and hoping one of them hit. I really like to narrow in and focus on what I'm choosing and why I'm choosing it. So this is the lineup I have, guys. This is kind of what it looks like right now. I will do another update on Saturday, and wish you guys a lot of luck this weekend. I will post an update. And please read the description. If I missed anything, please feel free to message me, ask me any questions. I'd love to hear from you guys. All right, good luck, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.